Let me tell you something right now, and I want you to sit down for this, because once I say it, it's gonna shake the way you see the world. The title ain't just a question, it's a declaration. Why is America secretly terrified of India's growth in 2025? Well, let me break it to you straight. It's not about fear of invasion. It's not about missiles or tanks or satellites in space. It's something deeper, something that keeps presidents up at night and makes billionaires sweat behind their designer shades. America ain't scared of India because of what it's doing. They're scared because of who India is becoming. Now you better believe this. When a country like India, with a history older than time and a future smarter than algorithms, starts getting serious, it's a whole different ball game. See, for the longest time, the West loved to treat India like it was some ancient land with elephants, yoga, and curry. That was the image. That was the narrative. But what do you do when the land of meditation becomes the land of microchips? What happens when a nation you used to ignore in boardrooms starts leading in blockchain, AI, quantum tech, and biotech all in one breath? I'll tell you what happens. The fear creeps in. Because you can't control a country that doesn't want your validation anymore. You can't contain a nation that don't need to play your economic games. India used to chase approvals. Now it's writing its own rules, and that scares them. Oh, it scares them bad, and let's not get it twisted. This fear ain't loud. It's quiet, it's in closed door meetings in D.C., it's in panicked phone calls between think tanks, it's in suddenly shifting headlines and policy U-turns. It's that silent scramble behind the curtain. Because they know something's coming, and it's coming from the East, India in 2025 is no longer a rising power. That word rising is obsolete. India has risen, and not just economically, spiritually, strategically, technologically, culturally. India is becoming what America used to pride itself on being, a self-reliant force that builds, innovates, and inspires. But here's what's different. India is doing it without stepping on necks, without colonizing, without waging wars. That's what really terrifies them. See, the old playbook doesn't work on India anymore. Sanctions, India laughs, media propaganda. India builds its own platforms. Diplomatic pressure, India walks its own walk. This is a country that once had to beg for tech transfer, now launching satellites at 1/10 of the cost NASA does. This is a country that was once dismissed in defense meetings, now producing 5th-gen fighters, hypersonic missiles, and a digital payment system so advanced that even the U.S. is trying to copy it. You know what else got them sweating? India's youth. These young minds are coding while sipping chai, solving global issues in 3 languages before breakfast. These are not the outsourced laborers of yesterday. These are the CEO, innovators, and visionaries of tomorrow, and the West knows that. Silicon Valley ain't scared of China's factories. It's scared of India's classrooms. Harvard and Stanford are slowly being rivaled by IIT and IIM. And the world knows, once India stops exporting talent and starts retaining it, the game is over. And let's talk military for a second, because people love to underestimate that. They say, oh, India's peaceful, India's diplomatic. Yes, but India ain't soft. There's a difference. This country ain't looking for war, but don't you dare mistake that for weakness. Because 2025 India is loaded. Not just with weapons, but with willpower. It's not about showing strength anymore. It's about having it and not needing to flaunt it. That's power. You see, America grew by being loud. Loud in Hollywood, loud in politics, loud in wars. But India grows in silence, in stillness. And that silence, it's terrifying. You don't know what's coming, but you know it's big. You know it's smart. You know it's unshakable. The very nature of India's rise is what makes it unstoppable. It's not fueled by debt. It's not built on borrowed time. It's grounded. in values, in culture, in intellect, in legacy, and America can't process that, because for decades it's been the one calling the shots. But now they see another country with the numbers, the brains, and the backbone to challenge that order, and they don't know how to deal with it. See, China made noise, but India makes moves, and when you make moves in silence, the whole world gets nervous. Because they can't predict you, they can't manipulate you, and worst of all, they can't ignore you anymore. India's foreign policy is a masterclass in balance, friends with Russia, trading with the U.S., diplomatically polite with China, but never submissive, buying oil from Iran without blinking at Western disapproval. This ain't a puppet state. This is a chess master, calculated, calm, dangerous, and if you're used to pulling strings, a country that cuts the strings terrifies you. Because how do you play the game when someone refuses to be a piece on the board? Let's not forget the economic dimension. India in 2025 is becoming the world's most attractive investment hub, not because it's cheap labor, but because it's smart infrastructure, scalable startups, and untapped markets with disposable income. The middle class is exploding, and with it, a whole new consumer base that no global company can afford to ignore. And here's the kicker. India ain't just consuming, it's creating, it's manufacturing. It's designing. Make in India used to be a slogan. Now it's a standard, and that has rattled the foundations of every Western supply chain. Because once you can build your own chips, your own tanks, your own tech, you don't have to bow to anybody. And that is America's worst nightmare. A country with independence of thought, independence of industry, and independence of identity. India is becoming that. Let's talk soft power. Bollywood's gone global. Yoga is in every corner of the earth. Indian cuisine is in 5-star restaurants in Paris. Indian CEOs are running Google, Microsoft, IBM, and more. But the real power, it's in how India is shaping minds, not just markets. Spiritual philosophies, family values, entrepreneurial grit, all packaged in a way the West can't replicate. You can steal designs, you can outsource code, but you can't duplicate soul, and India's got soul in abundance. Let me say this. India's greatest threat to the Western order isn't its economy, army, or software. It's its refusal to conform. That's what terrifies them. India is showing the world that you don't have to westernize to modernize. You don't have to kneel to rise, and that message, that is revolutionary, because it gives hope to every country that ever felt inferior. It inspires a whole new world to stand tall, and when hope spreads, that's when the old powers really start to shake. See, control works only when people believe they're weak. India's growth is telling the world, you are not weak. And that message, once it catches fire, is more dangerous than any missile. And here's the part that really keeps them up at night. India's doing all of this without breaking anything. It's not conquering, it's not colonizing, it's not dominating, it's just evolving, quietly, powerfully, in its own way. And let me tell you something else, 2025 is just the beginning. What we're seeing now, it's the opening act. The real performance hasn't even started yet. India is building an ecosystem that is sustainable, spiritual, and strategic. From green energy to AI ethics, from cybersecurity to fintech innovation, India is putting humanity back into progress, and that makes it unique. Because where other nations chase dominance, India seeks harmony. And that balance, that's terrifying if you've built your empire on chaos. America is terrified not because India wants to defeat it, but because India doesn't need it. And that, my friend, is the scariest position to be in when you're used to being the center of everyone's universe. When a country no longer orbits you, you realize you're not the sun. That's what India's growth is doing. It's redefining the center of gravity. So don't let the calm fool you. Don't let the smiles and handshakes distract you. Underneath that is a furnace, a fire that's been burning for centuries, and now it's finally being harnessed. India's growth in 2025 isn't just about GDP, it's about a collective awakening, a realization that they no longer need permission to be great. They just are, and that, right there, is why America is secretly terrified. Because when 1 billion people realize their worth, there's no force on earth that can stop them. Let me tell you something that's been bubbling beneath the surface while the headlines talk about elections, sanctions, or celebrity gossip. While the world's distracted by noise, a silent revolution is taking place, and it's got Washington shaking in its boots. See, America's not scared of bombs or battles anymore. That's old school. That's 20th century thinking. The real fear today, the collapse of control, the erosion of financial dominance, the quiet fall of something they thought was untouchable, the U.S. dollar, and who's leading the charge against this towering pillar of American supremacy? India, with the BRICS alliance behind it, building financial alternatives that are not just symbolic. They're practical, scalable, and dangerous to the existing system. For decades, the U.S. dollar hasn't just been a currency, it's been a weapon, a silent weapon used in boardrooms, trade deals, and international negotiations. When a nation didn't play ball, you hit them with dollar-based sanctions. When a company crossed the line, you choked them out of the SWIFT system. But what happens when the world builds its own playground, when it doesn't need to play on America's terms anymore? That's exactly what India is doing. And it ain't doing it with noise or drama. It's doing it with precision, intention, and long-term vision. India's involvement in BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has transformed from participation to leadership. The old BRICS model was more about collective bargaining. Today, it's about constructing an entirely new financial architecture that can rival the IMF, the World Bank, and yes, the dollar itself. And that's what's keeping Wall Street awake at night. Because for the first time, you're seeing a coalition led not just by oil, rich kingdoms, or isolated economies, but by innovation powerhouses like India, a nation with digital muscle, a rapidly growing economy, and a strategic brain that plays the long game. You gotta understand what India's doing here. It's not just talking about decoupling from the dollar, it's building an entire ecosystem that doesn't need it. It's launching trade in local currencies, pushing bilateral rupee-based settlements, and forming financial agreements with countries like Russia, the UAE, and even African nations, cutting the dollar out of the conversation altogether. That's not rebellion, that's evolution, and evolution doesn't ask for permission. Now let's get this straight. America's power in the world doesn't just come from aircraft carriers or embassies. It comes from the green paper with dead presidents on it. The dollar is what allows America to print debt like candy and still have nations buy it. It's what lets them fund wars without paying the real price at home. The dollar is the leash that ties much of the world's economy to America's whims. But what happens when India says, we don't need your leash, we've got our own path? That's not just a policy change, that's a power shift. When India settles oil trades with Russia in rupees, when it buys defense tech from France without a single dollar involved, when it sells to the UAE and invoices in local currency, it chips away at the very foundation of America's economic influence. Because the dollar's strength doesn't come from gold, it doesn't come from oil anymore. It comes from usage. The moment the world stops using it, the illusion collapses, and that illusion is fading fast. India is laying down digital payment infrastructure so advanced, so efficient, that entire nations are looking to replicate it. Rupee, India's unified payments interface, is now being exported as a model to countries that want to skip the whole legacy banking trap. Think about that. While America is still charging fees on credit card swipes, India is letting people transfer money between banks with zero fees in seconds. That ain't just tech, that's financial liberation. That's cutting out Visa, MasterCard, and every other Western gatekeeper. And when you cut them out, you're cutting the dollar's reach with it. But India isn't stopping at payments. It's moving into settlements, credit, and even blockchain-backed financial instruments. You've got Indian banks opening Vostro accounts with foreign nations, allowing trade in rupees without touching the dollar. That's not an experiment anymore, that's policy, that's institutional transformation. And with every successful deal settled outside the dollar, the BRICS-backed vision grows stronger, and America's grip weakens. Now here's what really twists the knife for Washington. India's doing all this while maintaining its democratic face. You can't accuse India of being a rogue state. You can't label it a dictatorship. It's not a pariah. It's a global darling, a tech hub, a strategic partner. So when India pushes a financial alternative, the world listens. And that's a nightmare scenario for America. Because if India can do it, others can too, and the domino effect begins. You want to know why America's terrified? Because unlike China, which often moves in ways the West can easily demonize, India is playing by the rules but rewriting the game. It's not breaking the table, it's building a better one, and guess what? Everyone wants a seat. From Latin America to Southeast Asia, from Africa to Eastern Europe. Nations are lining up to escape the volatility of dollar dependence. They're tired of being punished for political choices by a currency they don't control, and India is offering an alternative not with coercion, but with cooperation. Imagine a world where the dollar is just one currency among many, where oil deals don't need New York approval, where emerging markets don't have to beg the IMF, but get fair credit from a BRICS bank with India as a lead architect. That's not fantasy anymore. That's the blueprint being drafted right now in New Delhi, Johannesburg, Brasilia, Moscow, and Beijing. And at the heart of it is India's credibility, India's neutrality, and India's unwavering commitment to building, not breaking. This new financial world isn't just about money, it's about sovereignty, about dignity, about reclaiming control, and India understands that better than most. This is a country that was colonized for centuries, whose wealth was looted, and whose people were economically shackled. So when India talks about financial independence, it's not theory, it's history talking back, and history has a long memory. India doesn't just want to be rich, it wants to be free. And that freedom begins with decoupling from the systems that have long kept the global south dependent, docile, and indebted. That's what the BRICS-backed financial alternative represents, a way out. A new door, a shot at parity in a game rigged for too long. And the fact that India, not China, is the driving spirit behind this new model. That's what changes everything. That's what makes the old powers panic. Washington didn't panic when BRICS was just talk. It didn't panic when China flexed its economic muscle. But it's panicking now because India brings credibility, legitimacy, and cooperation to the table. It brings trust, and trust is the currency of the future. Not just paper, not just numbers, but belief. The belief that there's a better system, and India is quietly, relentlessly, building it brick by brick. Every bilateral deal signed in rupees, every new UPI corridor opened, every foreign country onboarding Indian payment tech, every cross-border trade settled outside SWIFT. These aren't just transactions, they're revolutions. Tiny, quiet revolutions that are adding up to something massive, something irreversible, and the dollar, it's watching its throne shake. The U.S. can print money, but it can't print respect, and respect is shifting. When African nations fly to New Delhi for trade talks, when Gulf powers welcome Rupee-based oil deals, when Southeast Asia chooses Indian systems over Western banks, that's respect earned. And with that respect comes influence. Influence that no longer depends on aircraft carriers or Hollywood dreams, but on systems that work, partners that listen, and growth that includes. India isn't demanding the world abandon the dollar. It's simply showing that life without it is not only possible, it's better, more stable, more equal, less risky, and when that reality spreads, when more countries choose autonomy over dependency, the days of dollar hegemony start to tick. Not in a crash, not in a bang, but in a silent, seismic shift that reshapes the global economy. America's fear is real, not because India threatens war, but because India threatens irrelevance of a system that's long benefited the few at the cost of the many. And now, with digital infrastructure, multilateral diplomacy, and a vision rooted in balance, India is offering the world a new deal, one without masters, one without chains, one where no single currency dominates, but where many thrive. And that's the real revolution, not one of arms, but of alternatives, not one of slogans, but of systems, not one of rage, but of quiet, unstoppable resolve.